Welcome to How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real podcast. I'm Rietta, and today I'm here with Greg Linkowski, MD. So, Greg, how do you deal when the shit gets real? Or just tell us a little bit about yourself.
First of all, Rietta, thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
My pleasure.
I love the topic of because essentially that summarizes some of my life story, and very frankly, I feel like at age 71, I feel like I've lived two lifetimes rolled into one, and I'm here to honor people in my family who have gone before me. And also, I'm here because at this station of life, unless something miraculous happens, biologically, I'm in my last quarter. And my profound goal and wish is to make it my best quarter. And despite things that I've seen, things that I've experienced, things that I still deal with, because I am not a perfect being, I'm still working on learning how to love more unconditionally. That is the legacy that I choose to leave, and also a legacy of generosity and forgiveness. And boy, oh boy, I need a lot of forgiveness these days. And, but anyway, fire away at questions.
Well, first of all, I love that you, even though you are later in life, as you said, you're still determined to keep being better. Where I feel like some people reach a certain age and they're like, I'm old, whatever, who cares? So I love that you're still like, this is going to be my best part of my life yet. That's awesome.
And I was reading today about attitude. I love a quote from Charles Swindoll about, and I would highly recommend anybody who may be interested, look him up and what he has written about attitude. He starts off by saying, the longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. And he finishes by saying, we are in charge of our attitudes. And really, Rietta, to me, life is difficult. Life has been difficult. I lived through a traumatic childhood, also lived through the life and subsequent passing of a very medically fragile child, our middle child, David. I've lived through the medical system as a physician, which has been a tremendous blessing from God. Also has been a difficult journey, a truly difficult journey. I have seen as a diagnostic radiologist much of human maladies and suffering for which I believe God has blessed me with the ability to arrive at accurate diagnosis with which I was able to help the clinician give the best care for that particular patient. And I'm really proud of having done that.
Good, you should be.
Yeah. And we also are living right now through life with our lovely daughter who is our firstborn, and husband who I love like a son, and 4 beautiful young grandchildren. That's just the icing on the cake. And I do want to say, having had our children with my wife, Lynn, who's my current and only wife, we're going on 42 years of what you might call blissful combat.
Ah,
Uh, you might, there's other ways to describe, but I will say, shout out to my wife, Lynn, who is a psychiatrist and who is still working part time, still adding to the lives of the precious population that she deals with.
oh, well, yeah.
Um,
You, both of you have made quite an impact then.
and I am so grateful for having been on this journey. Um, we are currently, we're a work in progress. Our youngest child, a son, Sammy, as it turns out, he happens to be gay. Growing up, and now I'm going to go real far back in the past. I grew up as a conservative Catholic in a blue collar family outside of New York City. Being gay or having a different sexual orientation, I learned was taboo. It was basically frowned upon, not allowed. And I personally have seen even Christian families basically sort of excommunicate a member of their family who happens to have a different sexual orientation. Sammy has helped me through my own prayer with God and also my own therapy in becoming a better father who realizes I don't own my kids, and nor is it my responsibility to place judgment on them or judgment on other people. And that's been a journey. That's been a journey for the folks out there who may be having some things going on personally in their family. Um, all I'm here to tell you is there is light at the end of the tunnel. And please, as parents, revel in the joy of being parents because that is so important. And the older I get, the more I appreciate my children and my grandchildren.
And that's not an easy thing, you see it all the time, even now. Like when people are stuck on their opinion, it's really hard to change that opinion, right? So the fact that you were able to completely change your thought process on different sexual orientation is a huge shift for you to take.
Yeah, I mean, and we're still dealing with some shit. I mean,
Aren't we all?
the shit has been real, and I'm here to tell you, uh, even certain family members have their opinion, and being from New York, people from New York let it hang out. They're they're amazing, but life's been an amazing journey, and I'm just here to tell you that uh, the best thing to do for me is to live in the present and do my best to do the next right thing in life.
We did kind of start at your end quarter. We kind of touched on your beginning quarter, but let's go all the way back to the beginning quarter. You did mention that you kind of had a less than ideal childhood. So walk us through that. What were you dealing with as a child?
Well, I was the second of 4 children. Uh, I was raised in the 50s and 60s in I would say very much a blue collar family in the suburbs of New York City, raised conservative Catholic. In fact, I was an altar boy in the Catholic Church for a number of years, uh, assisting the priest, even back when the Mass was in Latin.
Oh.
And interestingly enough, we had to memorize certain prayers like the Confiteor in Latin. Didn't entirely understand the English translation, but didn't seem to matter so much as long as you enunciated the Latin responses correctly, which I found a little bit odd. But I have to say, there was so much rich tradition and beauty having been raised Roman Catholic. In fact, I went to Catholic grade school, high school, and college. Um, Although I'm not a practicing Catholic now, I've used that rich background as a springboard for my Christian walk that I currently have. Uh, my family was very chaotic growing up. My dad was a World War II veteran who was in the Navy, who was there. He was one of those precious members of the greatest generation who was at Omaha Beach at D-Day and went through just so much. I learned this way further down the line, but for certain, my dad had a pretty bad case of untreated PTSD. Back then, they called it shell shock,
Mm-hmm.
and people were just basically expected to get over it. I can't believe the countless number of families that on all sides, American, German, Japanese, other countries, families that suffered the results of war. As it turns out, my dad, I believe, in order to numb himself, became an abuser of alcohol when I was fairly young. That wasn't the only issue in our family. I mean, there was plenty of codependence and other things. My mom happened to be the oldest of 9 children and grew up in a working class family. She and my dad both went through the Great Depression, and I'm certain my mom basically skipped a lot of her childhood in order to be like a surrogate parent to her younger children. Uh, that played out, in our family. Um, as it turns out, I have a sister who's 2 years older than me, and an event happened probably when I was maybe 5 years old, give or take a year. My sister got very ill and had to be hospitalized for a particular infection. I It seems to me that my position in the family became that of, in essence, sort of a hero, if you will. I became, in some ways, like the oldest person in my family. I found great comfort in excelling at school. And that was basically my way of gaining recognition and getting the love, which unfortunately was in pretty short supply uh, in my family. But that was that was my ticket. That was the way. In many ways, that was how I coped with being in, my family, and my siblings had uh, other ways of coping, some of which were healthy, and some, well, we all have our stories and our journey. I was A sentinel event happened probably when I was about 13 or 14. It was one Saturday morning that I will never forget. In fact, it's one of the things that had haunted me for many years after this event. But it was a Saturday morning. Dad had been drinking heavily early that morning. Mom and dad had been arguing. Uh, and I don't even know what really was going on with them. But my dad, under the influence of alcohol, apparently was so distraught that he announced to our family, he was in the kitchen at the time, he had a loaded 45 caliber semi-automatic pistol. He shot the pistol into the floor of the kitchen and announced to our family, I'm going upstairs to kill myself. We were frozen in terror. I mean, how could this be happening? I believe God was in the details as a group. Without even talking about it, we charged at Dad while he was on the stairs, stumbling up the stairs, and subdued him. And I successfully wrestled the loaded gun out of his right hand. I thank God his life was spared. I'm so grateful for that, because my dad was so much better than that. It could have gone the other way. I'm so grateful that it didn't. Um, After the dust settled, which it never really did settle, Dad came home a couple of days later after spending a couple of days at my grandmother's house. Our family acted as if that never happened. So there was a huge elephant under the carpet, which deeply affected all of us. I'm certain, and eventually led me to my own therapy, for which I spent many years grieving, letting go of my anger, letting go of my sadness about what did happen, and also about what didn't happen. So I essentially was learning from the beginning about how to be an adult, how to function, how to act as a husband, let alone a father. And my therapist helped me on the journey of self-discovery, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you now, I am very proud of how my wife Lynn and we're going on 42 years, as I mentioned, of marriage. In fact, in another week or so, we were generational change agents for our children. And I am so grateful that we, through God's help and through a lot of help through the church, through our faith walk, from various support groups, and actually certain family members who were very supportive, and friends. We helped shape the destiny of generations to come, for which I believe is my greatest achievement in life.
Well, yeah, having to wrestle a gun out of your dad's hands at 13 is not something that you ever should have had to do. My son is currently 13. I couldn't imagine him having to do that. Did you guys ever talk about it, or was it just forever the elephant in the room?
We did as years went on. Frankly, I can't quite recall the timing on that. Um, no, I actually can't. But I will say, in probably the last 5 years or so, maybe even 10 years, my brothers and sister and I have grown closer together, even through both of our parents have gone on. They've transitioned on to heaven, and I believe those experiences were useful for us to become closer together. It's hard to explain.
No,
Very hard to.
that's a positive way to look at it. I just, sometimes talking about it helps, and sometimes it's just not needed. If y'all were able to come together and bond together, that's really all that matters.
Absolutely. And even, and I have to say, when mom passed, she lived to almost 95, passed away just a few years ago. Dividing up the bit of inheritance that we got was seamless. And I am so proud of my sister and two brothers that we were able to, well, be kind and compassionate and understanding to each other, and also eminently fair. So, like, we didn't have and I've heard so many horror stories. Oh God,
Oh
about
yeah.
somebody changing the will at the last moment in order to gain all the inheritance. What we have is love and caring for each other. And my wish is to just walk the remainder of the journey with each of my siblings and my relatives, and also be there for those who are heading towards the end of the earthly life, which is inevitable unless you're Elijah or Elisha. But there aren't too many people who haven't faced
Hmm.
bodily death.
Exactly. So, what would you tell someone who's currently in like an abusive or not so great, terrible situation?
I would say you are worthy. Each of us is a uniquely created creation by God. Your voice, my voice, matters. And probably the most important thing is to believe that you do not deserve to suffer in silence. If you're emotionally, physically abused, sexually abused, believe me, I've heard so many stories of heartbreaking things that people do and have done to one another. Please reach out. Reach for that support. There's a lot of different ways in order to get support. I mean, nowadays, it's probably easier than it was decades ago. I mean, there's psychology, behavioral health services that are available to many, many people. And by the way, I'm proud of the fact that I have done a lot of my own therapy. Have I entirely arrived? No. But I'm on the journey. I'm definitely on the journey.
I think we
And
all are, to be honest.
yeah,
That
yeah. And support can be gotten really important for people to have a faith walk. I personally believe that it is so important to believe that life has meaning. And I have found it through my Christian faith walk. Others, friends and associates, have found it through other journeys. But to rely on people from the church, the synagogue, the temple, reach out. In dire situations, one can reach out to the police. If one's life is in jeopardy, you deserve to live. One cannot control another's behavior. If you're in a dangerous situation, support groups, psychologists, agencies, trusted friends or family members. And trust is something that I just don't give 100%. Trust is something that's earned over time and can be strengthened, can also be eroded based on, based on experiences. But just to summarize, get help if you need help. And the more people I talk with, doctors and otherwise, there's so much pain and suffering in the world that it's there's no shortage of that wherever you look.
Yeah, unfortunately. And you did end up writing a book called Dare to Thrive. So take us on that journey. What brought you to write it? Why was it 30 years in the making? And was it cathartic for you to write?
I began journaling probably back in about 30 years ago, in about 1995, when David was 2 years old. We initially thought when David was born in early 1993 that he was healthy. We found out about 3.5 months into his life that he wasn't making eye contact. And we urgently took him to the pediatrician just for peace of mind. and watched his demeanor change from very competent and in control to a look of horror on his face. And he told us, he said, David has developmental delay. That led to a lot of testing, getting a pediatric neurologist involved, metabolic geneticist involved, CAT scan, followed by an MRI. And we were to find out that, unfortunately, David's brain wasn't formed in the usual fashion, and his white matter was basically disorganized. And that led to random electrical activity in his brain, which manifested as seizures. And the more seizures he had, the further behind developmentally he fell, to the extent that David was functionally a quadriplegic and functionally an infant, couldn't talk, couldn't walk, and needed essentially 24/7 care. Well, that put us in a crossroads. I mean, here we have a daughter who was 3 years older, healthy, a son who was very medically challenged. By the way, I don't like to use the term disabled. It's, in fact, in many ways, many of the people I've met who are seemingly normal have disabilities, be they emotional, be they physical, whatever, but there is no perfection. I started journaling out of, I suppose, for my own sense of well-being. I was striving to make sense out of what was going on. And so I would write about events that were happening. We had, in David's short life of almost 10 years, a handful of times we had to take him emergently to Valley Children's Hospital, where he was having continual seizure activity. We even had to call 911 once and had firemen and paramedics come to the house because he was in continual seizures, and that could lead to basically respiratory arrest and subsequent death. So right along that time, while we basically were led to go to a small church. We had been going to a large church in our town. We were unable to have David with us in the congregation because he would make different noises and could be disruptive. So we wound up going to a small inner city church where the pastor, who developed into my best buddy in Fresno, he, along with other church members, really ministered to us and just covered us in prayer, helping us go from day to day. And we were very fortunate to be able to afford extra help. In fact, we had a live-in nanny for many years, and we were able to have David home with us for almost his entire life. But boy, oh boy, it changes the dynamics. In some ways, our daughter probably did not get all the care and attention that she deserved. Our youngest, who's, I believe, about 3.5 to 4 years younger than David, Sammy, got extra attention after David passed. And that whole dynamic, I realize this in retrospect. But I will say, for the families who are out there, and there are many families who have a member who is perhaps elderly, who may be living with them, who has dementia or other chronic medical conditions, or may have a member of their family who does have challenges of all different sorts. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you folks who are fighting the fight on a daily basis. Anyway, so David passed in 2002. He was almost 10 years old. I essentially continued on pouring myself into my career and my family, which was, the equivalent of a couple of full-time jobs. As a diagnostic radiologist, my career became more and more involved as technology expanded, which it has in the last 2 or 3 decades. Medicine and technology have exploded, and I was along on the journey, learning as I could. I did take full early retirement at age 60 about 11 years ago. I really felt in my heart that it was time to exit. I was able to leave with full early retirement, which is a tremendous gift. And I basically decided I want to do other things in life. So I was able to participate on a couple of different boards, one faith-based board of a group called Joni and Friends, which I do want to say helped our family. Joni and Friends, Joni and Friends, is a ministry created by Johnny Erickson Tada, who's a nationally well-known Christian speaker who heads up an amazing disability ministry that essentially ministers to families like ours and other families who are going through it. So I was able to give back in David's honor and in his name, which to me is, at this station of life, so important. And I was also able to help and give back. As it turns out, our youngest child, Sammy, is an amazing entertainer who actually has a degree from theater, film, and television from UCLA. He is down in the LA area, adding to the world through entertainment, bringing joy into people's lives, for which I am very proud. Equally proud of my daughter, who's a stay-at-home mom. But anyway, so fast forward from age 60, I was able to renew my interest in the accordion for which I took accordion lessons back when I was a preteen and early teenager, I was able to hone my skills with a jazz accordionist who lived in Fresno, who was world class. And so I participated in that, and we would go to some retirement homes and perform for those folks. It was so enjoyable. Well, anyway, about 5 years ago, I felt led that I wanted to become a life coach. And I felt that I have reasonably, I think I've done a pretty darn good job in retirement, just finding meaning in life. And so I actually was going to become a life coach for physicians, because let me tell you, we're a population that really are pretty hard chargers, pretty well, a lot of us are pretty perfectionistic and very immersed in our careers. And I was going to be that individual who would help see other arenas of life, that life really does exist after a career in medicine. And medicine has just been a beautiful, an amazing journey, but it doesn't define exactly who I am. It's a portion of me. Well, after graduating and getting a credential from Physicians Coaching Institute, life happened, and I realized time was better spent helping family and certain other situations that I was being called to help out on. Well, roughly about 3.5 years ago, I got this feeling. I can't describe it other than to say I believe God was leading me to that point, and with a little encouragement from a couple of my mentors, I decided that, yeah, I put the pieces together. I've gone through a lot of novel experiences. Why not share them? And by the way, I don't have total family support on this journey. I have to say, sometimes it's been kind of lonely, but important. And what I have to offer is my story, how God has helped us through, and I hope a few pearls of wisdom. I guess that's probably it. I mean, it took 2 years to write, and I was coached by a New York Times best-selling ghostwriter and her publishing group. So I feel as though I've been mentored and basically given the raw material with which to showcase my story.
So is the book published?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, it was published in March, and I know the lighting isn't the best. Entitled "Dare to Thrive: Lessons Learned from a Trauma Survivor," namely me. And so That's my story.
Where can people buy your book?
Barnes and Noble, Amazon. And by the way, if somebody or some bodies do buy my book, I would greatly appreciate a review on Amazon if you resonate with it.
Yeah, those reviews to us authors are everything. So I totally understand.
Yeah.
So you had a really nice quote in your bio that I really liked. It says, while pain is inevitable, let me try that again. While pain is inevitable, it does not define us. So what does that mean to you and why do you think that's so important to remember?
I believe life is a journey. And on that journey, I am here to learn what it is I need to learn in order to make myself a better and more fully human individual. And what I've tumbled to is probably the two most important things to me are love and forgiveness. That includes self, God, whoever God is. To me, God is love. And to be striving towards unconditional love and practicing kindness to myself, to Lynn, to my family, and even to other people. Like today, later on, I'm going to go to Costco, and I love it when God gives me like a divine appointment. It's it's a joy choosing joy and choosing life and choosing to love our choices. And I don't know, pain is inevitable for sure. I mean, who do you know, or who do I know that has a life? Uh, I haven't met anyone who hasn't, when you get to know them, hasn't gone through stuff. And by the way, if you haven't, my prediction is you will. If you haven't already, but it's not that is the important thing. I mean, the important thing to me is to maintain attitude, and for me, faith has helped me go from day to day. Like I'm looking forward to joining my son David in heaven when it's my appointed time, but I'm going to fight like hell to live. And that's a choice.
It is a choice. So any final advice or little wisdom you want to leave my listeners with? I know you've given a lot already.
um, just the statement, you are worthy. By the way, I love some of the work done by Dr. Brene Brown. Highly recommend her work. on vulnerability, authenticity, also just ways to begin to believe in yourself, that you matter. Each of us matters in this world. And that's despite the polarization, um, left versus right. Yeah.
All the things. Yeah. Yeah. I love it. It does all matter. Thank you so much for being here, Greg. I truly appreciate having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Rieta.
And this is how to deal when the shit gets real, guys. I will see you all next episode.